welcome. This is our Nature Journaling Educator Forum. And let's see, we need to turn off. Good. Evea has already turned off the waiting room, so I won't undo your good work. So welcome, folks. So if you are new to this crew, this is a group of educators who meet on a weekly basis, and each time we bat around different topics and ideas in nature journaling. And we usually focus around one theme or idea, but invariably all sorts of other ideas sort of pop up, and we tend to go off on some really wonderful, down some wonderful rabbit holes and side roads. But our general theme for today is thinking about classroom culture and the shared agreements of how we treat each other that we want to have, that will enable discussion, will help with peer-to-peer sharing, make a safe environment for our students to do the best nature journaling that they can, and also the best sort of thinking that they're capable of. And so to get us started, I want everybody to think of either experiences that you've had where you were in an environment that felt safe for you to share and really kind of conducive to your learning. And what were things that were deliberately done to help make that environment what it was? And were there any things that just sort of to be kind of an accidental thing that happened that made somebody think that made somebody kind of go like it made that environment safe? But especially if there are deliberate things that we've done, those often are the most will have the best chances to replicate those. And we also want to think about sharing. So think about yourself and sharing your journaling and resources or ideas with other people. And what makes that work for you? What makes that a positive experience? What would make that a negative experience? What would make that, or what in the past has kind of put out barriers for you to do that kind of sharing? What sort of mindsets do we want to have in the heads of the kids and ourselves? As this goes on, I've got my little notebook here, and I'm going to be taking notes and ideas. I tend to take little sketch notes, and I'll be making sketch notes of our conversation here, and I want to recommend that you do the same. People tend to we tend to remember things better when we do that. So it's a great opportunity. You know, we get better at sketchnoting by practicing our sketchnoting. So if you're going to be, oh, Rebecca's got a Hilda for a little icon, that would make thing one and thing two very, very happy. My daughters are big Hilda fans. So I want to, so let's just we want to start off thinking about those sort of things, and maybe to get us going, in the chat, don't put anything in yet on that topic. Again, our topic is what facilitates peer-to-peer sharing and what kind of classroom norms really kind of help us have the best place for nature journaling. If there's a key idea that is popped into your head at this point, let's put it in, but don't hit send. We're going to all cascade those in at once. So there's going to be a big idea dump, and that's going to get us started doing this. So just in the chat right now, this would be, you're going to set it as a message to everyone, but not yet. Not yet. Just give everybody, we're going to take a moment, maybe about a minute, to think of your idea. What's going to help you participate, or you're thinking about what helps students be able to do that? And you're going to have maybe 5 more seconds. Ready for the dump? And everybody hit send. Oh boy, we've got some good stuff in here. Avea, would you read these out to us? My reading is dyslexically challenged.
No worries. I'm happy to read. And one of the things too, I like your suggestion that just came up for that. I don't want to feel judged about my art or spelling. And I think we want to make sure that the kids don't either, you know? Supportive atmosphere, including being excited about learning from failure. Teacher bringing a sense of warmth and acceptance is a big part of environment setting, I feel. Also with students modeling what commentary might be like. Making students understand they are valued members whose ideas are valid. Celebrating mistakes, facilitating folks taking turns, noting when more than one person begins to speak, and making sure to ask each person who is trying to speak so that they can each be heard. Honoring all voices, honoring all ways of discovering the world. Honest sharing, sharing moments and being outside. Small group sharing, partners share with each other, and non-judgment. So far, that's what we have. Oh, one more, I think. Modeling that it's okay to not know everything.
Ah, right. So take a look down these, and if there's something here that either you wrote in that you would like to kind of elaborate more on, or one of these threads that when you kind of you saw that kind of triggers you to think of like, oh, and let's kind of get us I want to just get us started with that idea of that it's okay to make mistakes, right? Because think of like so much that we see, kids get rewarded for having the right answer. That classic Ferris Bueller teacher kind of, there's we're talking about a process in nature, starts with a P. Trees do it. Anyone? Trees do it. Starts with a P. Photo something. Anyone? And like we're not talking about people learning ideas. People are like get the carrot by like parroting back the right word at the right time, and it's not. And that's it's really clear that there is a right answer, and we want that. And And that gets communicated in lots of subtle and not so subtle ways. Or even when somebody says like, like any answer is fine, and then kid says something and it's the wrong answer, they're like, oh, interesting, and then oh, interesting, and then when somebody does say the right answer, they don't go, oh, interesting. They go, oh, tell me about photosynthesis. All right, and everybody's like, oh yeah, there really was a right answer all along. Thank you very much. But that like all this growth mindset stuff is talking about, that if you're not in a place where you're making mistakes, you're probably not in a zone where you're really effectively learning. Okay, well, can anybody else kind of add to, like, let's sort of pack onto that thread of mistakes and then jump onto another one of these.
Are we just unmuting, or are you?
Oh, yeah, let's I'm going to go from Billy Joe then to Chris Todd.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I raised my hand, but I wasn't quite sure how we were doing it today.
Oh.
That's all good. I just it's the same thing. So that making mistakes. So I'm not dyslexic per se, but I'm probably one of the world's worst spellers. So I hear you about not wanting to be judged, on my spelling. And the last couple days, I've been nature journaling with grade 7 and 8 students, and they're all online classes. And the first day I popped in, none of them turned on their cameras, and I was like, oh, this is going to be horrible. And I'd say to the teachers, like, oh, do they turn their cameras on? And they're like, never. And I'm like, okay. So I open up the chat, and I hope that things go well. I have to tell you that I've had the best time in the last couple of days with these students, even though I haven't seen a single one of their faces. And I went through the introductory to nature journaling. And again, grade 7 and 8s are tough, right? They're at that ripe old age of like, a little too cool for school, but I'm still a kid, and this is dumb. And honestly, I've had them just being like, this was the best. And my mind has been completely blown. But I always start off with saying to them, like, there's a guarantee that I'm going to spell something wrong today, and that's going to happen. And I said, I use pen, and so I have to come up with maybe some creative ways of fixing my mistakes, like so-called mistakes, right? And so I said, don't worry about that. And I've had some students being like, well, if we don't get everything written down in our I wonders, or if we miss something, are we going to lose a point? I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, I don't even know what your item is. I was like, so you can't make that mistake, right? Like, I
Right.
wouldn't even be able to judge you on that. And I said, there's for sure things that I've missed. I was like, this is a process. And so getting them to understand that with the nature journal is that it's their mind and their thoughts, and that no one can tell them that they're wrong, because it's your question, it's your thought on what it reminds me of, and it's what you see, that it's what's noticing. So no one can tell you that you're right or wrong. And so I really try to emphasize that to take away some of that pressure. And I mean, for art, I'm not the best drawer, right? Like, if I have the time to sit down, they usually kind of come out okay, right? But when I'm journaling with kids, I'm just so frantic and excited about everything that we're doing that they're not great, right? And I'll say to them, it's not, they use, Jack's idea of it's not a pretty picture. I say, think about it as more, like a diagram sort of thing of what you see. So if you see a bump, put in the bump. If you see veins, put in veins. And I said, however it comes out, I said, you can go back and sort of, do what you want to it afterwards, and sort of be able to do that. And I, use that same analogy that I think you've used in the past, which is the more you do it, the better you get. So I say to them, like, you might be feeling like, oh, I can't believe she's going to ask me to draw a picture. And so I try immediately to take that sense of relief away from them being like, I'm not great either. And that's only part of the process. It's just that tool. But then giving them the um the permission to be
Mhm.
thoughtful has been mind blowing in the last couple of days. And this is the first time I've done it with grade 7As. I've done a lot with younger kids and then some high school kids, which I've had some really great conversations. But, the leave it be questions, I try to model each of the three, like, could it be, let's see, and then the leave it be questions. Because they always go, what does that mean? And I say, and I give them an example. And then it's like it spirals into this methodical, thought-provoking place where the students just go to all these amazing places. Today we went from like GMOs to like how we're modifying it to like all these I wonder questions. Were going in all these plays, and I couldn't believe I was talking to 12-year-olds, by just giving them that permission and saying to them, I don't know the answer. I'm always the one who says, I have no idea what that answer is. But what I can tell you is this is what I know. And so can it, affect that answer in some way? And then we spiral into all these other places. But I am the first one to say I'm a bad speller. I'm not the world's best drawer. And I for sure do not know the answers. And so I feel like really letting them know that through your session lets them be open to just being whatever's in their brain gets to come out, right? It gets so excited, and it's been just amazing what they've been giving themselves permission. And the teachers are like, what is happening? Like, are these my students? Like, it's been just I can't say anything else except mind blowing. It's been really awesome to sort of give them that chance to just let their thoughts come out and really think outside of the box. And instead of me looking for answers, there is no answers that I could possibly look for when you're journaling. I don't know what their item is. I don't see their face. I'm only going by what they're describing in the chat, and it's honestly been the best time ever. So I just wanted to sort of, chime in on that whole modeling thing and just being authentic and real with the people that you have in front of you, right? You're not some like goddess of nature journaling, right? I'm just Billy Joe, and I can only just be me, and so I might as well be the most authentic me, and hopefully the kids will join me on this really awesome ride as we go kind of through this.
I so want my kids to be in your class. It sounds like crazy big fun.
Yeah.
Before I jump over to Chris, let's just unpack this a little bit more, because there are some things that you kind of teased on there. This whole idea of raise your hand if you wrote down in your notes permission to be thoughtful. Was it? Yeah, and does anybody want to kind of pick up on one of the themes here that Billy Joe was just saying? Yeah, so I'm going to bring Chris into this too. Yeah, this is.
She pretty much said what I was going to say, but I wrote down encouraged authentic effort, even if you might get it wrong. And I think she's demonstrating how well it works if the instructor says, look, I don't know. But I think it's the permission to be authentic really has to be nurtured in every kid. And they have to know that you value who they really are. And I think part of it is just getting to know them. It's what I think is different from my teaching in face-to-face long time ago, this idea that they can hide and not put their picture up and they're only doing it through the chat. And I'm wondering about the safety they must, they feel somewhat hidden. So there's safety in that, I think. I don't know how well all of this will translate in person and what the skills are. I saw some of the comments, people were saying no 7-second delay. The wait time is cut down with chat. I don't know. It changing as I listen to her, because I think authenticity needs to be the first thing that they understand, that you accept them for who they are, where they are.
So you're
Yes,
saying not just that you're presenting yourself as this authentic person.
Right.
I'm not the perfect person. I'm not
Right.
on the stage. And that the other side of that coin is that I am willing to accept you and meet you as you are. You are not the perfect either. Built into this is that we're both going to be goofing.
Right. I sort of, it really came home when you said you'd like your kids in Billy Joe's class, because obviously you can't say to them, I don't know how to nature journal, I'm not doing this perfect. They're not going to believe that because, that's your life. But
I do I do make mistakes, and I
Yeah.
will share those with them. So I will draw things and I will get things wrong. And I'll go like, oh, look, I thought that bird had that stripe over there. So I intentionally show those sorts of things to them. I think that those kinds of goofs
right.
are empowering for them, because then as they're doing their thing, they're like, oh, daddy didn't get it right either.
Right. And as long as you can encourage them to authentically look at that and say, hey, this is an error, and identify it, and then switch immediately into the non-judgmental place of playing with it. Let's see what I can make with this, or, what does this experience mean to me? And let's get back on track and stop judging. Let's start looking at what I'm getting out of this rather than, the judging.
Yeah, sort of, more play, less judgment.
Yep. It's more about curiosity and where do I go from here than, oh, shoot, I made another mistake.
All right. So you're trying to help, as you're going kind of through this forest, this idea you just said, where do I go from here?
Where do I go from here?
That an experience can be a closed door, or it can be sort of an opportunity for diverging paths. And so
Right.
give more opportunities to stay on paths or go on diverging paths, and less of these things that are kind of a big door. That's a little.
Yeah. I went from working, let's see, last March, I was only using pencil. I was so afraid, and I was erasing a lot. This is me personally. And I've gone to ink now and just play around with whatever comes out. And I think that's part of me being a learner in nature journaling. I'm not a learner. Well, I'm a learner in everything, but I saw it in myself as a learner. And it is a matter of confidence that you can make something out of whatever is coming. And that's, I think, what we're trying to teach, an approach to life, really, that will give you some confidence. And that's what the I wonder, I notice all of this is leading to. Yeah.
Can I just add something to that, Chris?
Sure.
I always, again, trying to sort of bring in that authenticity. So this school, I'm doing the entire school, and there's like 20 classes. And so I don't want to journal the same thing I've already journaled. So I'm actively looking for new items so that they can join me on the ride. And so that really helps in that
Right.
authenticity, is that they're watching me. Let's say I had a strawberry yesterday, and I was like, I've eaten a million strawberries, but I've never journaled a strawberry before. So I'm having all these I wonder questions, I'm noticing all this stuff. And then as I'm talking to them, I'm playing with the strawberry. And then what I notice is that, like, underneath the green leaves on the top of the strawberry, there's like more, like something that looks like seed pods underneath it. And I was like, oh, check this out. And I'm like so excited because I figured something out. And so they're watching me like go through that whole process. Or I had a spider plant, and I was like, I don't get how they grow. Like, I don't see any like, reproductive parts. And then as I'm talking to them, I start to pull it apart, and whammo kablamo, in the middle of all of those, I find the stamen. I've been growing spider plants for like a bazillion years, and I didn't know that. So I try to make sure that I'm journaling something brand new that I've never done, that's not in my journal. And then I'm hoping that my excitement and and authenticity of the process is somewhat contagious,
Right.
and it kind of goes in and spirals into this amazing spot where they can see that maybe they're going to take a chance and bite into their apple, or break open their cucumber, or whatever it is. And then you can start to hear the kids going like, I need to do this outside, there's this amazing rock in my backyard. I'm like, yes you do, right? Like getting really like excited for them. And so I hope that that comes through, and then it's just me being me, but they get to kind of join in on that ride, which I think is
Yeah.
kind of fun. Yeah, I think
Modulating
I
the
agree with
behavior.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Cool. I'm going to bring Catherine and then Aisha in on this.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I am a visual artist, and I've also been an art educator for years, and now I'm teaching in a school garden. So I have sort of slightly different experience with this, but I just want to say I love what everyone's saying. And one thing which I'm trying to do after 20 plus years of teaching is, even if I know the answer to the question, I've been trying not to say it. I've been trying to hold that back and sort of live in the question and let the kids, let the question linger, let it hang there, and let them really think about it. And even if it doesn't get answered right away, that's okay, because part of what we want them to do is learn how to formulate their own questions. And so the answers are not really what it's about in a lot of ways.
Catherine, that is such a huge
Yeah.
mindset shift that we have to take, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it used to be that we were valued because we had the answers, and we thought that our job was to fill in as many of the blanks as we could. And that's different than helping somebody see how to formulate the question that's behind the question, or the process of what does it look like when we're in that space kind of grappling with the unknown. And when we don't have an answer, that kind of dissonance in us can pull us into a deeper deeper observation. And all of a sudden, like, bam, there's the stamens in your spider plant.
Yeah,
And
and it's so hard when you know the answer to hold it back and not to tell them, because you want them to know and you're excited about what you know and you want to share it. But
and sometimes there is a place for giving an answer.
yeah, definitely.
But sometimes what that answer does is that answer closes the door. Oh,
Yeah, then
Yeah.
then we don't have to talk about it anymore.
yeah. And then, but then sometimes what the answer can do is, well, I think the best case scenario is like if you do have an answer, but you realize that that answer actually opens up a whole other can of
Yeah.
of more sophisticated crazy, that and just prying the lid off of that, like well, I heard this about this, but that makes me think of, like, if that's the case, then how come, like, I see that in a lot of the curiosity chains that if you've seen any of the curiosity chains that Fiona does. So sometimes, like, she'll, like, she'll come up with, like, well, if this, but if that, then you're into this crazy land.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say is I'm also getting a master's in education right now, and I'm doing this deep dive into the NGSS standards. And one of their big things is like teaching children at a really early age how to ask questions and how to ask good questions. So even in kindergarten, I mean, it's much more important that they're saying, what is this in the soil, and where did it come from, and who made it, and what did it do? And, just really like refining as they go on through the grades, refining their ability to ask the right questions, or to ask good and meaningful questions.
Mm-hmm. And that's a skill that throughout my education, teachers weren't really aware of.
Yeah.
Right.
And I like, kind of ties into what Billy Joe was saying about kind of, she wants them to join her on the ride. And she doesn't want to be on the ride that she's done for the previous 7 classes.
Right.
So that it's that you are there in an authentic encounter with a real mystery. And so when, rather than kind of staying in the safe zone of here's the stuff that I already know, to kind of get that out of the way and then run as quickly as you can right to the brink and start leaning out and seeing what's there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also going to bring in Aisha on this. Oh, you're currently muted. It happens every Zoom call, don't worry.
I know, and I laugh at myself every time. And it's Aisha.
Oh, I'm sorry, Aisha.
So it's okay. It's a lifelong project. Just going back to I was just going to share, going back to the no judgment, sort of jumping off some of what you and Billy Joe were saying, is one of the things I've been trying with the 5th graders, in terms of also even just setting the environment and the feel of it, and is reminding everybody how different our brains all are from each other. And often we've been back in person since October, so we're often drawing a similar thing at the same time, because it's part of something else we're studying. And I just like to share with them that there is no way each of us is going to see the exact same thing as each other, because we just cannot. And when I start talking about their brain, I feel this attention light go on in the students, right? Which is what we teachers use all the time. Did that work? Did we suddenly feel everybody sit up? And they all sort of sit up as soon as I start talking about the brain. And I'm just like, there's no way I'm going to see what you're going to see. So I'm going to learn from what you draw and capture, and your words and your numbers, just as much as we're all going to learn from each other, and then let's try and look at each other's, if, people are comfortable with that. And then that's a whole nother step. But setting it up that way has worked well for me. And that, again, was with 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. So I don't know about the older students. But just because I feel like I, as a non-artist, do learn from what they did. And I'm even learning more. I've been intrigued through this group to practice more adding numbers in, because I'm not drawn to math very much. And just seeing what the students decided to measure or count has been like, whoa, I'll do that next time. And I'll say that to them. I'm like, you counted all the nectar guides on Alstroemeria? That never would have crossed my mind. Wow, there's 32 nectar guides on one petal, right? And then the other students start counting theirs, because I've said it out loud. And then I try and do one thing like that for each student, but it is for me too, And that's, again, I think we all practice that, whether we teach art or nature journaling or whatever, is like practicing giving feedback that's something very specific, right? We talked about that a few weeks ago, but making that as authentic as possible. It's almost, I'm finding it's almost better, because I'm not that good at nature journal. So a lot of it is like, oh, draw that. Oh, notice that. Oh, that kid did that, So that's all I wanted to add.
That's really helpful. I like that, what you're saying about how, our, so human perception, Aisha?
Aisha.
Aisha.
Eyeball, I shall go draw now.
Aisha. Okay. I just made a visual note of that.
Thank you.
And I'm going to get it. So what Aisha's saying about how we're actually seeing different things, is that is a really profound and subtle piece there. So your sensory streams are completely overwhelmed by the amount of data that is coming in through them. So what your brain does is, at different moments, it is prioritizing the information that is coming in from one over another. Like, until I mention it, right now, nobody's really aware of the pressure of your left foot on the floor, right? And now it is, right? Can you feel the pressure of your shoe against that foot even? On the top of your big toe. Now, as I mentioned it, like, yes, but that was actually there all along, but your brain was just going like irrelevant, 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 irrelevant. So there's all this stuff coming in through all your senses. And so what your brain is doing is, without your conscious attention, it is taking whichever data streams it thinks are the most relevant, and it's amplifying those, right? And so and this is also happening, like when you're seeing something, when you're looking at something, there's a bunch, you're not seeing everything. You are seeing in focused detail a little spot about the size of your thumbnail at arm's length. And the rest is out of focus. And you're moving that spot around, but your brain is then splicing all this stuff together. The stuff at the periphery of your vision is extensively altered and made up. And then what your brain does, when it gets some information in, it sends this to a part of your brain that is going to identify it. It goes like, oh, that's a puppy. Right? And then it sends that it's a puppy message back out to the sense stream to make your eye see it, make it look even more like a puppy. So what's going on is, it's not just like, oh, that's a puppy, but that's a puppy. Now go make it more puppyish.
Yeah.
Right? That's some crazy. So each one of us is doing this kind of filtering in different ways. And so even the raw data you get of what you're seeing is different. And then what's going to be significant is different, because different people have different filters, different lived experiences, or other sorts of things that is going to make like this. Like I walk into the room and like, like here we are all to make decisions. Like somebody else walks into the room, they will notice like, wow, I'm the only woman in this room, right? But me being a male walking into that room, that's not a filter that I'm consciously, regularly thinking about, right? And so it's not something that I'm tracking, and so I don't notice it. And so that just the idea of what we each see being so different in the same place, right, is fascinating and important to also help us. There's this one famous study where they took, I think it was like a Dartmouth-Yale football game, and this was just at the time that video footage was just being started to be created, and the game was filmed. And the game turned really, really violent. Star players were injured. There were bad things going on. And they then showed that, I maybe like have the teams wrong, but they showed this film to a bunch of Dartmouth students, and they had them record all the fouls that people made. And they showed it to the Yale students and had them do the same thing. They're watching the same footage, and they saw completely different games, with the other team being bad and their team sort of struggling against these, but they're seeing the same thing. So that what we're perceiving and what we're filtering is so different. And you're honoring and respecting that and having that as part of the conversation. And I like that. I'm going to zip over to the gallery. So if there's somebody else that also wants, I'm going to bring Evea in.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that I think that Laura's been raising her hand for a while. I was mentioning Laura.
On my screen, the little raised hand is close to the color of the bookshelf that it is in front of.
Yep.
And so on my little screen here, it is.
I also did this, but that's
because
I have a ooh.
Right.
And some insights. I'll do the insights first.
Great.
Hope I'm not going back too far.
No,
the thing that I do with my students, and I'll just remind you that they're future elementary teachers, is talk about that science is so much about doing things and trying them and seeing if it works, and if it not working, and that there's so many things that you do that don't work, and that's how progress is made in science, is finding out the things that don't work. We're working right now with some modeling and using both the idea of it as so modeling is a way to communicate your ideas to another person, and so we just keep putting that up there. Okay, well, how could somebody be confused by this? And is there something a gap? Is there something that isn't here that you fill in the back of your head? Well, let's get this out there. But how that also is helping with modeling. The modeling is helping you clarify your thinking as well, which comes from so we've been doing that, and but really honoring when we find things that we can realize why they don't work, right? What's confusing about this? What's that? Oh, well, that helps us, because then we'll know what to look for. And then another thing that I do is whenever I ask them to give me their ideas, I always give them two things. One, you can always make your response conditional. So you can always say, well, it could be, right? Or it might be, or some people might think, or a second grader might say, that's absolutely fine. And then if you're completely stumped, I ask them to please, and sometimes I just ask for this, but a question. What is a question that is going to get you one step further in figuring this out? What is that missing next piece, that you're not sure of, or you're like, well, but that depends on this, and I don't know that. And so getting them to, and it's been, I thought that they'd be frustrated. Today I asked them, because it just seems like it's taking forever. And they actually said, no, I'm not frustrated. But it's interesting that there's so many layers, and this is kind of something, and I was like, wow. I just thought they must be frustrated by the fact that we're still trying to model solids, liquids, and gases at this point. And but we do a lot of can you help us figure out where this needs more, where we might need to clarify or whatever. And so acknowledging that that's part of the work is trying to figure out where things are muddy, where things need might need to be cleared up, and that sometimes that reveals, maybe I don't really kind of get this, and that's okay, because that means that's the next thing I might put on my list of stuff to do. So, and then I had this happen. This is so, it is so incredibly cool. So we grow cranberry beans in my class. They're a bush bean. They're called cranberry. I mean, if you've done gardening, you're there, but cranberry beans, they look sort of like pinto beans, and they have cranberry, but they have cranberry colored marks on them. Okay. And the bean pods, when they dry, very pretty. On Monday, while I was teaching, I'm like, I'm all by myself, right? Practically in the building. I kept hearing like somebody throwing pebbles. I'm like, what is that? What is it? So afterwards, went to look around, and I went over to where they are. And when they dry, they split open, and they were throwing the dang beans all over the floor. That's what I was hearing, was boom. Well, I didn't witness it. I infer this, but the beans were on the floor and the pods were split open. And I was just so excited about it. And I was like, you guys, this is what happened. This is so cool. Anyway, and so now I have to sketch this next to the sketches I made of them while they were hanging, and they were but they split open all by themselves. Look at this one, it curled.
Oh, wow.
And I guess I have to give myself permission that if I get it into my nature journal, then I can compost it. Otherwise, I'm going to be drowning in specimens. But this was, I mean, I had no idea. I thought, oh, it's a bean that people grow. It probably doesn't have a dispersal system anymore.
What a great example of that authenticity of the experience, where you don't know, and you're letting yourself get all Billy Joe excited.
We're gonna have to call it that.
Joe.
You and a Billy Joe.
Billy Joe on that, and that's. I think that is one of the advantages of this approach, is you are now in a position to let yourself be bowled over by wonder. And if you are kind of looking for the opportunity to be surprised and delighted by the world, that is such both a more authentic and fun way to position yourself and to kind of prime your neurological responses than to, I am the expert, I know what's going on. I know that these are going to dehiss in this fashion, and that will be their seed dispersal mechanism because I am the expert, right? If you kind of set yourself up to be that person, then, something that's a surprise is a vulnerability instead of like a boom, 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 it pop, pow. You're not able to really get excited about it because you have to have this front of like, oh yes, of course.
Well, and there's somewhere in the middle, which is I could get really excited about things but you have to let them be also, you can't then turn around and say, oh, look, I figured this all out. This was really exciting. And let me tell you all about virtually my discovery and everything I went through. They have to be part of it. They have to be experiencing that same wonder and aha, and they have to have that chance, or else they're just kind of like, remember, I have older students. You're weird. So.
In Pacific Northwest tribes, there are different words for I know something because somebody told me versus I know something from my own personal experience. And those are such different levels of meaning and of evidence. And in this society, we kind of conflate them and sort of boil them all down to stuff that I know. And it just and it also just sort of ties into that whole guide on the side versus sage on the stage approach to doing this. So we're seeing here then some things that we can deliberately do to bring this way of being into our classroom. So what is going to make it both safe and more likely that this dynamic is going to happen in our classroom? Are there ground rules that we can set down? Are there we have our examples, we also have, what are there any kind of class norms that we want to set in addition to our example to make this sort of thing start to pop and fizzle in our classroom? I'm going to jump over to Nicholas and bring you in on this.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well? Excellent. I wanted to maybe scale back also to part of the initial question to be able to answer this new topic about feeling comfortable. And I've seen for like young teenagers up to young adults in the problem of comparing themselves to each other, and when they are drawing their things and marking all their observation, they are comparing to each other, but then many of them are like, oh, he's drawing better than me, so I will not show what I did because I will feel like less, or this will be judged. And then even though we are trying to foster like a very open and collaborative way of doing that, all the other classes or all the other teaching that they have been exposed to, I've been also always pushing them towards comparing to each other and being the best at what they do without understanding their own mistakes was the key to their success. So I was curious to know what could be some of your ideas around that. But from my own experience, I've seen that people were maybe less prone to compare in a negative way when they were all doing a part of what they love. So for example, if we all do like an exercise of drawing a landscape that is close by the school or the class we have, what can people find that they love in that place? For example, one is maybe attracted to the flower that is on the side, or this guy is more for the birds flying around or something like that. And I didn't find other ways so far.
So one thought that kind of jumps to my mind on that is being really explicit with the students about what my expectations are and why we are doing these drawings. And that I say that we are not doing these drawings to make pretty pictures. And if you get a pretty picture, that's okay. But that's not the purpose of this. We want to notice things that we otherwise wouldn't have seen. And if you notice something that you otherwise wouldn't have seen, or it slows you down to ask a better question, that drawing is successful. It helps you remember something more vividly. That drawing is successful. And so to be explicit about that, or you're stressing, say, the observation, and then when you turn around and give the students feedback, what I do is also reinforce that same thing. When I'm giving feedback, I'm not saying like, oh, look, that flower looks so pretty. What a gorgeous drawing. I'm so proud of you, honey. That's a really beautiful drawing, right? Because I've just been talking about it's about observation, observation, observation. Don't worry about pretty picture. And then if I look down at it and I go like, hey, good job, pretty picture.
You screwed
And
it up.
yeah, I've just, right. So what I do is I look at the drawing and I notice an observation in it, and then just reflect back to them that I'm noticing that you noticed this, right? So I want to be really consistent in the feedback that I give when I'm looking at student work. Now, in an art class, I give feedback on art things, right? So I want to make a distinction here between an art class and a nature journaling class. So if we're doing a class on, you know, how do you draw whatever it is, that's sort of more of an art class. And so I will, in that context, often give art feedback. But even when I'm doing that, I try to avoid saying, kind of giving some label like, oh, that's a pretty picture. I'll say that this technique you use successfully here, and it makes this part work because of this. Look, there's this technique in action, right? But I don't even do that when we're nature journaling together. When we're nature journaling, I'm like, oh, I noticed that, you know, like, so in the art class, I might make a comment that, notice how you're putting that dark thing next to that light thing, and it makes that light thing really pop out. That contrast really makes that part dynamic. And if you cover that part with your hand and there isn't that contrast, notice that it just sort of feels a little bit more flat. Ooh, now there's ooh, yeah. So I'm giving that feedback, but I'm not saying pretty picture. I'm noticing how a technique or strategy works. But then if we're drawing that same nest and we're in sort of a nature journaling context where it's about the observation, I would be making comments and observations about like, oh, I noticed that you have observed that the fibers in this are of different sizes. And you've got these little fine ones. And those are, so that's a really interesting observation. So some critters, they use, oh, and look, on the inside of the nest, look at all the fine stuff in here. So essentially what you're doing is, you know how we do the I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of? They've done I notice, and they put their I notice on the paper. I'm just doing an I notice about what they noticed. And so I'm noticing that you noticed, yay notice.
Yeah, that's I think great to even like maybe to translate that to their peers, because also they are kind of sensitive to the judgment of their peers, and that will sometimes come even before you had the time to give any feedback. And then they will say, oh yeah, my friend just said that my drawing was really bad, so I will just like be ashamed of that, or I will not take your nice analysis into account because I was already hurt by my friend there.
Yeah, and that's where kind of the group norms really kind of come in. Because if we don't have that conversation with our students about, we're doing this and where we're not, this isn't an art contest and we don't want to be doing this. And we want to say to them that, like, if we'll just start like who's got the pretty picture and it becomes a pretty picture contest, then people who draw pretty pictures, they'll be all into this. And for the rest of us, we get left behind. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, and just to let them know, it takes some practice when we're making our comments about these things. How, you know, notice an observation that they've made and focus and make observations about their observations. And that's what we're doing here. Otherwise, you're right, the default mode is they just kind of go like, oh, that's such a pretty picture. Oh gosh, Susie, you're so good, right? And that's not a productive mindset for our nature journaling. You're right. So we want to have that conversation explicitly with them to help them, not just that we're using that kind of language, but that becomes part of the way the community has discourse about what we're seeing. And they'll see you doing that, and you let them know that this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. I think that really helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, Avea, I want to bring you in on this. You made a comment I think is absolutely, and Aisha also. But you're making a comment about the how something like the Nature Journal Club Facebook page. It's a useful place to get resources, but it also, it starts to become this place where we are, we're seeing people's, here's my pretty picture gallery. And that makes it less of an accessible place and less of a useful place.
I've been trying to think about for a while, like what would be some good ways to help change that, because I think whenever we go to like our in-person classes with, or rather, no, I guess our computer screen classes with you or Melinda or Brian or any of the others, we can learn, and we feel learning from you that it's not about the pretty pictures. Like when we're sitting down and learning with you, then you're teaching us that, and so we feel that way. But I think that there might be a lot of people who join into the group who maybe haven't had the experience of going to the classes and really hearing that. And so I think that there's this beginner's fear, and I know I felt that way myself and had to overcome it, where we worry about, oh, our piece isn't going to look good, or we don't know certain things. And so people will put their like these amazing pictures on and say, I'm a beginner, this is my first post. And then the rest of us are like, oh. But then I think that then I pity those poor beginners, because if they're anything like I am, and I know that I can't be alone in doing this, people will think, oh, geez, now I have to make every picture look like this, because otherwise I won't be living up to that first standard, and they could get stuck. And then that's when you'll have the people who you look into their journals and you're like, oh, but you didn't take any journal entries in between one class and the next class, which I know that we've talked about before. And it's kind of like, and it's because they feel so stuck. And so I think that I'd like to find some sort of a way to discuss more on the Nature Journal page, sacrificial pancakes, or that's sort of why Fearless Fridays got created. So I was thinking like maybe an announcement on the first Friday of the month or something like that, where it actually gets put as an announcement and spotlighted there on the page, where we talk about Fearless Fridays, and everybody just like adds to a thread or something like that. And then, I mean, of course, every Friday, but make that an announcement every first Friday of the month to remind people repeatedly about this, and to have maybe the occasional thread that gets spotlighted where people will be able to practice these things about it not being about the pretty picture. And like you said, celebrating that. I mean, I know that, and I know we can't say this necessarily with school kids, for reasons that Marcia said, but like celebrating this is your brain on paper, or modeling where the comments are about the brain and being on the paper, where maybe the question is, oh, so what was the most challenging part of creating this for you? Like, what was your growth edge? Or like what Marley talks about with bread and butter and juice and growth edge, where we talk about, what was the like, in your comfort zone part, what was the, oh God, you got so excited and like went off with your questions chain part, or what was the part where it was like, oh, was really, really challenging and I had trouble with this, but I learned from more with it. Because the more we talk about these things, then the easier it gets to talk about it with our students, whether our students be kiddos or adults or whoever, or ourselves. Another thing is like to talk about, like, to have better discussions within ourselves, because then we can model that with other people. Because if we're modeling great discussions, and this is something I know I struggle with everybody else, and saying, oh, I noticed that you do this, I knew that. And then you look at your own and you're like, yeah, my pieces suck. Then it's kind of like, it makes it harder, even though we don't think it does. It can make it a lot harder to be able to say all of those positive comments to other people if we're not doing the same for ourselves, because maybe we're taught that we're not allowed to be self-confident, and that's really challenging. And we do want to break the cycle on that, right? We want to make sure our kids don't pick up that same lesson. But if we're practicing lack of self-confidence, then the kids are going to pick up on it. Kids are wicked intuitive and wicked smart. They are. And I'm completely rambling right now. I apologize. But yeah, like Fearless Fridays, please, Fearless Fridays. We should do this more, and practice, I'm looking at people's questions and saying, oh, what an interesting question. That made me think of this question, you know, respond to what people are actually putting on the page. Ask them a story like, oh, so you went to this place. What else happened when you went that day? So that instead of it being specific comments, it's about engaging with their story. If you remember that each journal page is a story, I think it makes it a lot easier to engage with it. And I think that's all I had said. I really have to run now because I have a health appointment, but thank you so much for this discussion. And I just want to hug everybody, and I'm going to be back later to see what I missed. So
Group hug, everybody lean in.
I love all of you so much. I'm going to watch the video later to see what I missed. Everybody.
Thank you for helping us with this. Have I made you, you are an admin on Nature Journal Facebook? Yeah, okay. And so I love that idea about that announcement every first Friday. Let's make that happen.
I'll go point on it. I'll be the one who does that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And be safe, be kind. And we are so grateful to have you as part of this community.
I feel the exact same about all of you. Thank you. Take care.
Aisha.
Okay, I remember to unmute myself this time. Thanks. And thanks for my name, Jack. I think the thing that came to my mind, actually for all of us, and also what Nicholas was saying, is I feel like competition and judgment are so part of our society that I feel like we kind of need to keep that in mind. Like, we cannot overnight, or even maybe in a semester, change that in a, you know, a nature journaling thing. This is bigger than us. This is very much how Western society works. I've become more and more aware of that as I get older and struggle with that, you know, myself, the judgment. And it's just, I'm just sort of saying it's just kind of there, you know, and I feel like the more years I teach, the more I understand what I can tackle and what is a big societal thing that I'm not going to get to in a few classes with my students because it's so much bigger than us. I'm going to keep chipping away at it. But just sort of, you know, trying also not to self-blame when that competitive edge is not going away in our nature journaling classes, or that judgment among peers is not going away. Well, every other class they were in or after school event pushed them to compete. So all I can do is try and provide a bit of balance. So I want to put that out there. Even more and more the meditation things I go, so many of them are about judgment, right? We're all struggling with that. So our young ones are too. And again, the place, maybe there's a few minutes to bring in some authenticity. Again, this group seems, you know, very open to that and just personally sharing. Hey, I judge, I feel judged by others. I really don't want to show my drawings to Jack Laws because I've seen his. In fact, I don't want to show mine to anybody in this group, you know, but maybe I will, maybe I won't, you know, that could be another avenue. And the only other thing I wanted to say, going right back to the beginning of Nicholas's question, is I do feel like the word, pictures, number thing has really been a savior. So if somebody is not good at drawing, they usually are really good at writing, or they're really good at the numbers, or two of the three. So as I brought that more and more into journaling and just reminded them those first 5 minutes, like, remember, before you know, think you're done, have you included all three, so that everybody felt successful in some way. And even if we did a peer share, a glow grow kind of thing, there would be somebody's written work that you could comment on versus somebody's drawing, and then you could feel good in some way or another while you pushed your own edge, you know, and that can be part of it. Is like, where's your edge? Okay, why don't you just draw just one leaf, you know, or just the tail, or whatever it is as you improve, you know, which is what I tell myself, like, oh, that's daunting. Why don't I just look at the venation, you know? Or as somebody in that group last week said, just look at the shades of color. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
That's really helpful. There's that, yeah, the idea that in that words, pictures, and numbers, one of those will be your safety, and one of those will be your growth edge. And so the place where you feel more secure gives you a place to stand as you take a risk in those others. That I think that is, and so then in our journaling here, we don't want to let ourselves get tunnel vision on just one of those. Very often when I'm looking at one of a journal page by a student where they've had a lot of experience drawing pictures, I'll make a comment about a question that they asked intentionally. Actually, that's a really good way to frame that.
Great.
So let's see here. We have then, I'm going to want to show folks my doing a little bit of sketchnoting. And we've been through a lot of interesting stuff in this workshop, and I think that we're hitting on a number of ideas that are kind of core. This wonderful idea of welcoming the mistakes, and we've got everybody from. Hold on, I need my assistant here. So Bob Ross now with a homemade sweater and stylish hat. He's been talking to us for a long time about giving yourself permission to make those mistakes, and that to not just say it, but it takes work to really believe it and feel it. And if we get pushed off of that, to come back to this, to making mistakes being a part of the process that is essential to kind of move us forward. And we're about that process and not those answers. The idea of giving students in this journaling process that permission to be thoughtful, by kind of authentically not sort of setting yourself up as the answer person, the guru, but there's here's my Billy Joe quote for the day: to join me on the ride. Right? I want that. I want that to be part of my ethos and how I roll. The idea of the way we respond and engage with students, it can either kind of be shutting a door or it can be opening up different paths and possibilities. That for me was a very useful visualization, and the idea of the way we see things, the way we filter things, the way we connect with things, they're all different. And so we want to get somebody else's perspective. And it's a very, when we're doing this observational stuff, it's a very authentic way to kind of open ourselves to a larger discussion about understanding how other people can sit through the same experience and really see something that is different than what we saw, and that we're both right. The idea that those words, pictures, and numbers, there's both your growth edge and your safe zone in there. And we also talked a little bit about the language of uncertainty with the perhaps. Again, not setting yourself up to be the experts. You're also going to model and encouraging your students. That tentative kind of honest language of science, the language of uncertainty, is where we as educators, as scientists say, well, it could be, or the evidence suggests that, or this piece of evidence suggests this to me, or this might be, but those words that kind of sound like you're waffling, the media hammers on people who talk like that, right? So if somebody says, evidence suggests that, right? That's the way the scientist is going to talk. Somebody who's not from a science background sees that actually as a weakness, and saying like you're not sure of yourself. And so it's a vulnerability in parts of public debate. But we want to sort of recognize that, and sort of recognize that we get reinforced very often by talking with assurance outside of our area of expertise, or at least in this country, guys sure do, right? And so, we can all think of people who, when they are not in their zone of real expertise, will still kind of carry on like an expert. And our culture rewards those people. But the more that we are, as educators, modeling the behavior of deliberately using the language of uncertainty, and if somebody tries to rhetorically take advantage of that and say, well, that's just a theory, and you say, well, actually, we're using that language in different ways. I'm using it in a very specific form, the way that scientists use. So in common talk, a theory is just kind of, one person's winged that idea versus another. But as scientists, when we're saying a word like theory, what we mean is an explanation that has stood up to extensive testing and has a large body of evidence behind it, and is extremely useful and predictive for understanding the nature of the world around us. And it's really different things. So being comfortable in that space, but it also is a humble place to also be kind of using this language where you're intentionally saying, could it be perhaps this, the evidence suggests that, and that also kind of keeps us more in an authentic place where we're connecting the evidence that we have for claims with the strength of our confidence in those claims. So I hope that this was a fun and thought-provoking time together. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, comments, and ideas. Again, as a community, we are moving forward, trying to figure out best practices in how do we share this. How do we share this with others? How do we nurture these same seeds in ourselves so that we can be an example to our students? And I really appreciate all of your expertise. Also just wanted to point out that if writing and words is your growth edge, I'm going to spotlight you here, Rebecca. Rebecca has started these, wow, your water bottle just turned into your background. That was crazy. Rebecca has these Writing Wednesday workshops. If that is your growth edge, something that we find really helps people be able to develop is what we call deliberate practice. So deliberate practice is not just doing the same thing again and again and again. Serena Williams has a coach for tennis. Serena Williams is very good at tennis. She's practiced it a lot. but Serena Williams has a coach. And so the coach helps her figure out what to do to kind of improve the game. So part of deliberate practice is being able to kind of get feedback and guidance from somebody who's got a lot of experience with it. Rebecca is, at least on my screen, you're on that side of me, so that's why I'm pointing that way. So Rebecca has started a series of kind of writing workshops for nature journals every Wednesday. Can you tell us just a little bit about it? If that is your growth edge, this is an opportunity to.
Sure. So we started having the weekly writing workshops. It's been a few weeks now, and yeah, for some people, writing is their strength. For some people, it's the growth edge, like we were talking about, but it's a workshop for everybody. So wherever you are on that, you don't have to be good at it. It's not about, and sometimes I do show examples of famous nature writers to get inspiration, but it's not, just like how it's not about making a pretty picture, it's not about having the best writing, it's not about being like a published author or anything. I mean, if people are interested in that, like, go for it. But it's all about using writing as another tool to learn and to find your voice and write the things that only you can write. Mm-hmm. So that's what it's about, and it's on Wednesdays now.
Yeah, so I want to encourage people to check that out, and also to right now a lot of people are sharing the visual on the Nature Journal. I want to also encourage people to one way which we might be able to help people sort of incorporate more of that words, pictures, numbers triad into our journaling practice is if a number of us on the Nature Journal Club Facebook page, if we also started include more writings or Aisha's limericks.
Yeah, and a few people are asking, so I'll just add, I'm putting them as events in the Nature Journal Club Facebook page. So if you look at the upcoming events, you can find it there with the link. And they are also on the new Nature Journal community calendar on Jack's website, which was mentioned earlier. So if you look at that calendar, it'll be there on Wednesdays.
So if you go to events and on my website and go to the Nature Journal Club community calendar, you get all of these groovy things. And look at this, there's Wednesday. So we've missed today's. So it's at 12 Eastern time, that's noon Pacific time. And because I'm looking at this calendar from the Pacific time zone, my website has picked up that this is the time for me. But so that's Pacific Daylight Time. But those are at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on you can find them there. So hey everybody.
I also am posting the recordings of the workshops on YouTube, and I just put the link to that in the chat. Excellent.
Well, everybody, thank you all so much for being here. And we really look forward to exploring more aspects of how do we make ourselves the best ambassadors and communicators of these aspects of science, art, and being alive. And really appreciate you all doing this with us. And until next time, this is your Nature Journal Educators Workshop.